Welcome to the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat Program with Rabbi Shalom Rosner. Tzurba is a revolutionary halacha sefer which guides you through over 300 topics in Jewish law in a unique signature style. In this weekly series specifically, Rabbi Shalom Rosner learns through the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat volumes, helping us all master the Halachot of Shabbat in just 2 years. Tzurba volumes are available for purchase worldwide on Amazon. And to learn more about Tzurba, or for those in Eretz Yisrael looking to purchase volumes, please head over to tzurbaolami.com. For more information, see the description below. And now, Rabbi Shalom Rosner.
Okay, let's get into this week's Shiur. Again, we are in the Tzurba Mirabbanan volume number 20, the Lax family edition, the Azov family volume, and we are up to Shiur number 6 in this volume, and that is the Halachos of Muktzeh. We started Muktzeh last week, and now we are up to the second Shiur regarding Muktzeh. Last week we spoke about the background for Muktzeh. We spoke about the different reasons that the Rambam and the Raavad give for Muktzeh. 4 different reasons, 3 by the Rambam, 1 by the Raavad. If you remember, Gzeira Mishum Hotza'ah, that was the Raavid's edition, but the Rambam says so you have a Shvisa Nikeres, so that it could be recognizable both for you and for others that the day is different, just like your hiluch has to be different, then your dibur has to be different, your tiltul has to be different, and the other reasons that are given. And then we got into the concept of a kli shemalachta l'isser, which is a different type of muktzeh than all other muktzahs. Kli shemalachta l'isser can be moved. We mentioned that the Isra of Muktzeh is not to touch it. You're allowed to touch Muktzeh. You're not allowed to move Muktzeh. Certain things that might be moved when you touch it maybe can't be touched because you're going to move it automatically. But Muktzeh can't be moved. But Kli Shemalachta L'Isser, a stapler, a pen, a crayon, any type of Kli that is usually used L'Isser, that has the heter of being moved, l'tzarach gufo and l'tzarach makomo. If I want to use it for a mutter purpose, I want to use a scissors to cut chicken, then it's mutter, l'tzarach gufo. L'tzarach makomo, I need the place where it is. I left a kli shemalachta l'isser on the Shabbos table. I want to set the table, so then I'm allowed to move it to use the place. That was only by kli shemalachta l'isser. That's the only category of muktzeh that has such a heter, and that's why some don't even like to call it muktzeh in the category of with all the other muktzahs, because it's a gzeira. It's a gzeira of tiltul kalim, which was made at a different time in history than the other muktzahs, right? We saw the Gemara in Shabbos last year, that this was made in the days of Nehemiah and Ezra, but we saw the Gemara in Shabbos Daf Lamed, which talks about when David HaMelech died, and Shlomo HaMelech went and asked the question of the Beis Medrash, because the mace is muktzah, that's muktzah machmas gufa, which we'll talk about in this year. So you see, that was much earlier than the gzeira of tiltul kalim, of kli shemalachta l'isser. So there are different categories of muktzah, but that's what we saw last time, the kli shemalachta l'isser. This year we're going to split up Shiur number 6 into 2. And we're going to get into first to introduce Kli Shemalachta Laheter. Are there any limits? Muktzeh Machmas Chesr and Kiss we're going to talk about, and we're going to start talking about Muktzeh Machmas Gufo. So those are the 3 topics for today's Shiur. So we learned Kli Shemalachta L'Isser is allowed to be moved for limited purposes, but we're not allowed to move, the Gemara says, you're not allowed to move a kli shemalachta l'isser mechama l'tzel, which basically means for its own benefit, from the sun to the shade, literally. If it's in the sun and I wanted to protect it, I'm not allowed to move it. That's for itself. So those are the 3 levels of use of needs. L'tzarach gufo, l'tzarach makomo, and mechama l'tzel. And the Gemara's maskana was, mechama l'tzel is not allowed, but for a kli shemalachta laheter, a kli that's usually used for a mutter purpose, then I could move it even mechama l'tzel. Right, that was the maskana of the Gemara, and let's review that again. The Gemara, the sources, page 257. 257 in our volume, source number 1, here in Shiur number 6, the Gemara tells us again, if you're review, Tan Rabbanan, Barishon Hayomim Shlosh Kelim Nitam B'Shabbos. Originally, when they made the Gzeira, Nehemiah saw that there was such rampant Chilul Shabbos that he asked moving everything. He mattered just a few things that were needed, that were the basic needs. Barishon Hayomim Shlosh Kelim Nitam B'Shabbos. Just 3 types of kelim: Miksoa Shel Dveila, a type of knife for cutting figs. Vizua Malisron Shel Kedera. Remember, that was a type of item to wipe out the pot, and a little knife. You need a knife to cut your food. And then eventually they started mattering until the maskana is, Rava says, Amar Rava, there in source number 1, Kuf Chav Gimel and Shabbos, Hitiru Davar Shemalachta Laheter, Bein L'Tzarach Gufo, Bein L'Tzarach Makomo, V'chazru V'hitiru Mechama L'Tzel. Muktzeh Kli Shemalachta Laheter was allowed to be moved no matter what. gufo, makomo, or even mechama l'tzel, or even for its own benefit. And that's what the Rambam rules, like that maskana of Rava, right? Rava and Abaya, we pass on like Rava in all the cases. The 6 ones we mentioned of Yakagam, those are famous, those 6. But we pass on like Rava in all the other cases. Says the Rambam, Hilchot Shabbos Perachafei, Kol Klisha Malakto Laheter, Bein Shahaya Shal Eitzo Shal Cheres, whether it is made out of wood, or earthenware, or stone. Oshal Mateches, Mutter L'taltal B'Shabbos. It's mutter to move on Shabbos. Bein b'shal atzma oshal kli, bein l'tzarech gufo, bein l'tzarech atzma. Right, for itself. That's what the Rambam says. The first b'shal atzma oshal kli, and then makomo or gufo. The Maggid Mishnah though has the following diak. The Rambam and the Gemara say you're allowed to use a kli shemlachta laheter. You're allowed to move it, even mechama l'tzel. What about less than mechama l'tzel? What about for no purpose at all? Will be no purpose at all. It's hard to come up with. Why would you move something for no purpose at all? If you're moving it, you obviously want a purpose. I don't know. What if you you're banging a spoon? Let's say a spoon is a klishim lachta laheter. So you're just like tapping a spoon, right? Daydreaming, tapping a spoon. Would that be? That's not mechama l'tzel, really. Is that l'tzara gufo? That might be l'tzara gufo because I want to bang the spoon now. So it's hard to know what would be shalol l'tzara klal if you have no. But let's say you could come up with a shalol l'tzara klal. Says the Maggid Mishnah. I think that would be aser. The Gemara says that klisha malachto laheter is mutter even in chamal itself, but it doesn't say a level down. Even if shalot tzara klal, maybe this, maybe shalot tzara klal for Shabbos. Am I allowed to move a klisha malachto laheter on Shabbos to protect it for after Shabbos, something like that? So would that be enough? So the Maggid Mishnah says in source number 3, Vida. It sounds like from the Rambam, based on the Gemara, that a kli shemal de laheter cannot be moved if it's shalol tzara klal. V'yaf harashba kein hela b'herakirin. The Rashba also says this in the 3rd parak. Sheish lahachmir shlo lito kli shalol tzarach, should not be metaltal a kli without any tzarach. V'chein bedin. And also it sounds that way from the Gemara. Shrebi Gemara, Rava Bava Hiter. Rava, remember all the levels of Heter, it was Aser, and then little by little they matir. Upiresh, to Shalol Litzarach Afilu Mechama Litzel. What does Shalol Litzarach mean? That means Mechama Litzel, protect it. Ve'im das Rava hi lahatir afilu Shalol Litzarach Klal, says the Maggid Mishnah. If Rava meant to say that any need, so Shalol Litzarach should mean Shalol Litzarach Klal. Why does Shalol Tzarach mean Mechama L'Tzel? Lo haylo lahaske Mechama L'Tzel. It shouldn't have said that. Elo haylo mar Shalol Tzarach. The Mishnah seinu Dahainu Shalol Tzarach Klal. V'chen advar machram sham lefi daiti. Says the Maggid Mishnah. I think that's a diak from the Rambam and the Gemara that to move a klisha malachto leheter for Shalol Tzarach Klal is Asur on Shabbos. V'yesh mefarshim, the Maggid Mishnah says, some don't make my diak, the matir na klisha malachto leheter afilu Shalol Tzarach Klal, ve'in le mashi yismochu, he does not like that heter. The Ran also agrees with this, but he has a caveat. Says the Ran, source number 4, Umiyu. Afilu no marklain. The klisha malachto leheter shalot tzara klal asur. Even if you want to say klisha malachto leheter has some limits, there are certain things that are not even klisha malachto leheter. They're even better. Meaning, you look in the Gzeira of Nehemiah, there were certain things that were included in the Gzeira, klisha malachto leisr, klisha malachto leheter, but suggests that, says the Ran, food. Food was never included in the Gzeira. So you're allowed to move food shalot tzara klal. There was never an Isser that was matir'd. So if there was never Isser that was matir'd, then it's never going to have any limits on it. So that's the Ran. The Ran quotes, like the Maggid Mishnah, that there is a limit on Klisha Malachta Leheter. Source number 4. The Klisha Malachta Leheter, Shlot Tzara Klal, Asur L'Taltalo, Hani Mili B'Kalim. By Kalim, a Klisha Malachta Leheter might have some limitations. Avo B'Sifra Kodesh, what about Svarim? Va'ochlin. Ein lanu. There are no limits at all. Lefisha Caleb shenasru mitchila ein lan latir l'mashe b'shachachamim. A kli that was matired, fine. You could say that it was only matired for a certain purpose. Ava kisvei hakodesh va'ochlin, but svarim and food shelo nasru me'olam. That was never included in the Isser. Kol machmir alav lahavi raya. Then that's not Isser at all. Anything that was not included in the Isser originally doesn't have to have a heter, and we wouldn't limit the heter. And that's exactly what the Shulchan Aruch says. Again, quotes the Chumrah of the Maggid Mishnah and the Ran, that Klisha Malachta Leheter has some limitations, but on the other hand, whatever was never included, what's even beyond, so that's going to be mutter. Says the Shulchan Aruch, source 5, Klisha Malachta Leheter, mutter l'taltalo afilu eino el tzorach hakli. Even if it's not l'tzorach hakli, shema yishaver o yiganev. So, eno elo l'tzorach hakli, right? Kli shvat el heter is allowed to be moved, what we call mechamal etzel, for its own good. Avashalo l'tzorach klal, but if it's no need at all, asul l'taltala, like we saw. But anything that wasn't included is not a problem at all. Kisvei hakodesh va'ochlin mutar l'taltala mafilu shlo l'tzorach klal, even shlo l'tzorach klal, it's going to be allowed. It's going to be allowed because those were never included in terms of food. And Tosfos just adds on here, it's not just food. I said before, maybe a spoon. Says Tosfos, kalim used for food, bowls and spoons and cups, those are all like food. That was never included in the Gzeira. Even though you look at the Gemara, you think that all those kalim are also included. No. Says Tosfos, those are like an extension of food, and it's even better than a kli shamlachta leheter. Tosfos, Miksor shel tvela lo chashiv ala kalim delabene kibul. Only kalim that don't have a receptacle. To pshita, to kosos, ukarus, utzlochios amataltlin. Cups and bowls, for sure, that was never included. And therefore those bowls and cups, they could be moved, even shlol tzar klal, even if you want to be machmer like the Maggid Mishnah and the Ran says the Shulti Giborim, right, one of the classic commentaries on the Rif, source number 7, lefizek kosos ukarus utzlochios umaksoa shel dveila. Vizu amalistron, right, the kalim that were never asered, the Shulti Giborim puts that with kosos karas slochios. He adds that. Right, there are different levels of understanding heterim. You could have, right, we have in the Gemara talks about Tumah hutra b'tzibur, Tumah dechuya b'tzibur. We have the discussion in the Achronim about Pikuach Nefesh on Shabbos, whether something is nidchet, there's an isser, but it's pushed aside. Hutra means there was an isser, but it was matir totally. But then there's another concept called shul, it was never nechlal my isser in the first place. Like, for example, heter of ochel nefesh on Yantif. So you could say, why are you allowed to cook on Yantif? Is it that it was usser, but then there's a heter that the Torah says that you're allowed to cook on Yantif? It's an isser that's matired. Or do you say it's an isser that disappears because of the heter of ochel nefesh? Or the Ramban's lashon in Parshas Emor, no, Yantif, it was never aser. What does it say in the Torah is aser on Yantif? Meleches avoda. Kol meleches avoda los aser. That's what's aser. But cooking is called meleches hana'ah, not meleches avoda. So it wasn't that it was asered and then matir. It was never asered in the first place. It's like, why are you allowed to cook on Tuesday? You're allowed to cook on Tuesday. Oh, okay, it was asered, now it's mutter? No, it was never aser on Tuesday. So, of course, it's going to be mutter to cook on Tuesday. So, cooking on Yantif is like cooking on Tuesday, according to the Ramban. It was never nechlal in the Isser at all. So here, too, it was never food and svarim, and maybe, like Tosfos says, food utensils were never included in the Isser, so therefore, it's even better than a Kli Shamlachta Laheter. So even if you want to say a Kli Shamlachta Laheter has limitations, that the most you're allowed to do is Mechamal Etzel, but when it comes to bowls and spoons and food kalim items, that would be mutter. Totally. That would be mutter totally. The Mishnah Berurah quotes this as machlokes. The Mishnah Berurah in source number 8 quotes again the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't quote this chiluk. So Mishnah Berurah says, "Avashol tzar klal." Let's read the Mishnah Berurah, source number 8 on page 260. Dahainu im kol hayom lo yisrachenu klal. Right? If you won't need it at all, that's shlo l'tzor klal. If you're going to need it that day, it's mutter. But if you're not going to need it at all, shlo l'tzor klal. V'hu adin kosos ukaros utzlochios v'sachat shakab yashulchan. Also, food utensils. The tedirin betashmish lochal le'avtoris muktzeh klal. There's no muktzeh at all on them. Uka ochlin v'kisvei hakodesh dami. That's like the Shulti Giborim says. V'alkein mutarin l'taltel afilu shlo l'tzor klal. V'yish machmir nafilu b'kilim elu. Some are machmir by these kalim. Either because there's no extension of food. There's food and food kalim. Even Tosfos only said food and svarim were never included. But the kalim having to do with food, that's an extension of the Shulti Giborim. That's not mafurish in the Shulchan Aruch, so maybe that would be a potential problem. Says the Rav Ovadia also, finishing up, source number 9, Chazon Ovadia, Klin lim shamalachta laheter, gon kos ha'omed l'shtiyah. So he puts the food utensils into the category of kli shemalato leheter. Ukarus utzlach yoso amos lechol mehem, or cups and bowls. V'sakin omedes lachtoch bo lechem abasar, or knives that you can cut meat or bread with. Mutter letaltal on b'Shabbos. One is allowed to be metaltal on Shabbos. Bein b'shul gufam shishtam b'shal adam l'tzorach atzmo. Bein b'shul makomim sheros l'sheves b'mkomam. For whatever the his need of a he's machber that he shouldn't be metaltalit for no purpose at all. Rav Chaim Noah also. So again, it doesn't come up that often in terms of being metaltal something shalol l'sara klal. But again, food is mutter totally for sure. Svarim mutter totally for sure. Kli shemalachta laheter l'chadchila, one should not be metaltel shalol l'sara klal, maybe for tomorrow's purposes. And food utensils, that's a machlokas. That's a machlokas, whether that's considered like food or whether that's considered like kli shemalachto lahet. Okay, that is issue number 1, kli shemalachto lahet. Let's get to the next category of muktzeh, machmas, chesron, kiss. Muktzeh, machmas, chesron, kiss. So now we get into the next category of muktzeh, and these don't have any types of heter moving. Let's start gufa, let's start bakomo. Maybe we'll talk about in the future moving indirectly. What's called tiltum anatzad. Or tiltu begufo. But now we're just getting the rules. General direct muktzeh, direct touching, moving a muktzeh is not allowed in all the other categories of muktzeh. Muktzeh machmas chesron kiss. Chesron kiss literally means it's financial loss. Potential financial loss. Usually this category is talking about expensive items, but as we'll see, lav dafka. Not for sure expensive items. So what is this talking about? So as we saw, Shabbos Kuf Chav Gimel, the Mishnah tells us, source number 11, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Kol ha-kelim nitalim. All kelim can be moved on Shabbos. Chutz mi-ameser agaldo v'yasei shel machresha. A big fancy type of saw or a peg that goes into the plow. That is, those two are not allowed to be moved because those are special, fancy, only used for purposes. So the muktzeh machmas chesron kiss is the next one that we're going to focus on. And again, the Mishnah says in Shabbos Kuf Chav Gimel, the Rabbi Yossi tells us that you have these special types of kalim that are not normally used for anything else. So those have the status of chesron kiss. They're muktzeh. Chazal said you wouldn't use them for anything else on Shabbos except for what it's supposed to be used for. So that is why it has the status of muktzeh chesron kiss. Says the Gemara, Shabbos Kuf Nun Zayin, even Rabbi Shimon, who usually has a more limited approach to muktzeh, but here he would agree to this muktzeh, even Rabbi Shimon. Says the Gemara, source number 12, muktzeh machmas chesron kiss. I feel Rabbi Shimon modeh. Did tznan kol hakelim nitalim b'Shabbat chutz min hameser agadav yasei shel machresha. So Tosfos says the Gemara says that Rabbi Shimon would agree, and Tosfos notes this means even l'sorach gufo, l'sorach makomo, you can't move it. You can't move chesron kiss. This category. Yesh li zar shel ataltla afilu tzorach gufo, says Tosfos, and this is what the Shulchan Aruch paskins. The Shulchan Aruch in Shimon Shin Ches. Shin Ches is the siman about muktzeh, and this, by the way, is the first muktzeh that the Shulchan Aruch talks about. As I said, kli shabat leheter, leiser, that's all a secondary type of muktzeh, and it's different. But real muktzeh, off limits, can't move it at all. Says the Shulchan Aruch, kol hakelim nitalim b'Shabbat, chutz mi muktzeh machmas chesron kiss. All kelim can be moved except for chesron kiss, kigon, sakin shel shchita, o shel mila. Yeah, what are some examples of special knife for shechting or the mila knife? You're not going to use that for anything else. You're nervous that it would get damaged. Izemel shel saparim or sofrim, sakin shel sofrim, v'chulu, a type of quill. All those are asir l'taltalo, even l'zorach gufo, even l'zorach makomo. V'hu adin, says the Ramah, kelim yichadim l'schora. You have items that are going to be that are designated for selling, for merchandise, that also your makbid, you don't want it to get ruined, that could also be chesron kiss. Let's say you have an item that you want to return to a store. You don't want it to get damaged or else they're not going to take it back. That could be chesron kiss. So what exactly is the definition? How would you define it? So the Rambam tells us a definition. Source number 15. Kol kli shemakpid alav shema yivchesu damav. Any kli that you're makbid, that the value might go down. Kigon kelim hamuksim l'schora, like items that are used for business. V'kelim yikarim biyoser, or fancy types of kelim. Shem makbid alayim, shem yifsedu. I know yesterday I was at a wedding and somebody gave me a pen to fill out the ksuba with, a very fancy pen. He says I only use this pen on special occasions. So l'chora, that pen is not a klai shel machtal iser. If you only use that pen for special occasions, that's chisar and kiss. Also l'taltal on b'Shabbos. V'zeo nikra mukba machmas chesron kis. That is chesron kis. And that's what the Mishnah Berurah says. Mishnah Berurah says, explains at the beginning of Siman Shen Ches, again, the Siman about Muktzeh. Rotzel Omer afilu klishim lachto le'isr nital al kolpanim l'sar gufa makomo. Klishim lachto le'isr can be moved at all, but this one cannot be moved at all. Chesron kis. Again, often it's expensive, but lav dafka. Lav dafka, if it's designated for its usage and you would never use it for anything else because you don't want it to get ruined, that's enough. Your makseh mi daito. And again, a lot of this has to do with your mindset. Your mindset. The Beis Yosef says, again, even if they're not valuable, like the example I gave and they gave before, if you want to return something to a store, that's going to make it chesron kis. And again, there's a lot of subjectivity here. If you look in the Yalkut Yosef in 18, din muktzeh machmas chesron kis tali b'kpeidasam shel bailam. We'll see what this comes up very lamaisa. It's tali on the kpeid of the bailam. Something that's chesron kis for me might not be a chesron kis for you. If the bailam aren't so makpid, lo avi muktzeh l'didei. It's not muktzeh. Av k'shachir makpidin, even if others are makpid, shelo l'shtamish b'chayfetz el dvar machadim. It could be muktzeh machmas chesron kis for one person and not for the other person. What are some examples? So you see in the Yalkut Yosef in 19, he quotes some examples. Some of them we might not even recognize. Bule doar, lo muchtamim, unused stamps. You wouldn't use a stamp for anything else except mailing a letter. Again, we don't really mail letters nowadays. Darkon, a passport. A matzlema, a camera. Right? Eric, fancy types of pieces of paper. Sakin shalmila, pemutos, candlesticks, even if they're lit, that's called muktzeh machmas iser. But even if they're not lit, those types of candles, you want to just show somebody some of your silver connection. So you're going to take out a coast to show them, okay, but the candlesticks, they weren't lit when Shabbos started, again, but you wouldn't use them for anything else, so that would be a problem. A check, taklitim, right? These are all different types of chesron kis. The Magen Avram, interesting, the list paper, like paper you write on. So in the days of the Magen Avram, maybe it was you wouldn't use that for anything else. Niar chalak havi muktzeh. V'nirli muktzeh machmas chesron kis given to omi l'ksiva kabarale. You're makpid. The Magen Avram. The Pri Megadim wonders, I don't know, we use paper for other things. You'd crumple up a piece of paper and, I don't know, make a paper airplane and cover, you want to use it for a bottle cap. So Pri Megadim says, I'm not sure if paper would be chesron kis today. The Shmir Shabbos also quotes that regular type of writing paper is not chesron kis. It would be klishim l'achtal iser. Klishim l'achtal iser. Your paper is a klishim l'achtal iser, yeah, because you usually write on it. But you could use it l'tzar gufo. If you want to, I don't know, make the paper airplane, which maybe is that bona, but we're not going to get into that right now. But again, using it for any other purpose, l'chora, it's a klishim l'achtal iser, says the Shmir Shabbos. Though Rav Moshe still thinks that, I don't know, nobody, I guess he would only use paper for writing, and therefore, says the Rav Moshe in source 22, Lo matzinu bardas shema abi neyara sheyachol lichtav aleim. I don't know anyone who uses paper for other purposes, that paper that you could write on, you just lose it. Okay, so this is paper. Interesting, what about, and this is very, very lamaisa, what about electronic devices? What about electronic devices like cell phones or laptops? So they're at least a kalisha malachto le'isser. Do they have, are they more than that? Are they chesron kis? So that's the question. A number of poskim in the Shmir Shabbos, the Pnei Halacha quote that these are chesron kis because they're generally only used for what they're used for. You wouldn't use a phone, you wouldn't use a laptop for anything else. But the Piskei Teshuvos notes that it depends how they're used. And again, this might depend on the user. If somebody would use them for other purposes, you'd use your phone for a bookmark, you'd use it to hold papers down, you'd use it for other some other purpose, or I'll add, well, would you throw your phone across the room to your friend? That's not chesron kis if you do that, right? You wouldn't throw a laptop, but would you treat it in a special way? So that it depends. It might depend on the person. Piskei Teshuvos 23. Ubizmanenu kol sugi machshirim elektroniyim lemineihem umachshevim v'telefonim lemineihem v'shar machshirim digital lemadinim lemaisa yesh ladaski akol toli bakpadas bali hamachshir A lot of it is totally on the das of the Baal Machshir. It depends on the owner. If you don't care and you'll fool around with the phone, you sometimes put it on paper so the paper doesn't fly away. Or you'll give it to your 2-year-old to play with the phone a little bit. What's he going to do with it? It's okay, I'll give it to play with. That's not chesron kiss. You wouldn't give your 2-year-old your passport to play with. You wouldn't. You wouldn't give it your driver's license to play with. It's not Muktzeh Machmas kiss. El Kli Shemalach Iser, what could be moved, L'tzorach Gufo, and L'tzorach Makomo. There is a question on the Achronim. To be chesron kiss, do you have to at least be a Kli Shemalach Iser? Could it be a Kli Shemalach Heter? Could that also turn into a chesron kiss? So the Shulchan Aruch Harav is mashma, the Balatanya, that it has to at least be Kli Shemalach Iser. If it's Kli Shemalach Heter, then it can't turn into chesron kiss. Kelam HaYikarim B'Yoser, says the Shulchan Aruch Harav. Afal Pi She'enan L'Schar El Shalachtom L'Iser. If they're blocked on L'Isser and you're makpid, so then that could be chesron kiss, implying that if it's a Kli Shemalach Heter, then there wouldn't be you wouldn't be able to get to the next step. But that's not in the Rambam. That's not in the Shulchan Aruch, that limitation, and therefore many assume, the Shmir Shabbos says, even if it's not a Kli Shemalach Iser, right? Let's say you have a fancy painting on the wall. That's not a Kli Shemalach Iser. That's the heter. It's just a picture, but that could be chesron kiss. That could be chesron kiss if you would not use it for any other purpose. Says the Shmir Shabbos 25. Kol davar adam kovei lo makom machmas erko arav. If anybody sets something in a spot because of its great value, umakbish lo lataltaloso michshash shemi yiskalkel, and you're makbid not to move it because it might get ruined. You could go and show on kier, a clock on the wall, tmuna umnutit, a fancy painting, shemachbid aleh gamze bichlal muktzeh machmas chesron kiss. Let's say I want to take it off my wall to show somebody closer. Can't do that on Shabbos. Ein kol heter l'taltalo. There's no heter. V'chein aron kavesh adam nizar shlo l'taltalo mikomo. You have a heavy closet. Shemi is kalkal ikavatilto. Maybe it's going to get ruined. You never move something because you don't want it to get ruined. Muktzeh l'taltalo. You let it open the door. A refrigerator. A refrigerator might be a chesron kiss. Again, you could open the doors. But you can't move it. The Piskei Teshuvos notes that, again, we're talking about something that you wouldn't move because of its value. If you wouldn't move it generally because it's heavy, but not because you're concerned about the value, that's not chesron kiss. That's not chesron kiss. That would just be regular. That's the Piskei Teshuvos in Siman Shin Ches, in source 26. Aronos v'makara v'shar kelim v'chafatzim kvedim ma'od. If they're very heavy, if you don't move them, because you don't want them to get ruined, then kiss. That's chesron kiss. Even though sometimes you move them in order to clean under them, like before Pesach. But if you don't move them not because you're worried about the loss, because they're so heavy, then there would be an issue of there would be an Isra Muktzeh only at most l'tzarech Kli Shemalach Iser. Therefore, you can move it Tzurach Gufa l'tzarech Makom. Rav Avadia also holds that a Kli Shemalach Heter cannot be chesron kiss. He writes in the next Lamaisa. The Aruch HaShabbos suggests that maybe there's no real machlokas here. It depends how makpid you are about it. Again, it sounds like it's machlokas. Kli Shemalach Heter. Can it be a chesron kiss? But he tries to put everybody together. He says in source 28, the kol she'ena kli muchan klal l'shimush b'Shabbos. If the kli has you didn't think about it at all on Shabbos. You would never use it. Ubaylav makpidin al kach hariz a muktzeh. But lachein b'derech klal kli Shemalach Heter. Most of the time, kli Shemalach Heter are not muktzeh because there's a possibility that you would move it on Shabbos. Right? Muchan l'shimush b'Shabbos. But kelim shebechanut. But if you have kalim, let's say in the store is closed on Shabbos, and you're going to go in there to get something, right? Anything that's totally not in your mind to use on Shabbos would be in this category. Okay, so that's a little bit about Muktzeh Machmas Chesron Kiss, but there are again many examples of this anything that you wouldn't use for any other purpose. And then let's start now the next category of Muktzeh Machmas Gufo, which that lashon is not in the Gemara anywhere. But there are examples. We've called it Muktzeh Machmas Gufo, inherent muktzah, no usage. Right? The Gemara does not give this formal name, but it's basically anything that is not a kli. or have usage. Food is not a kli also, but food is not muktzeh machmas gufo. Says the Shulchan Aruch, says the Gemara. Shabbos Kuf Chav Daled, source 29. You have it there on page 269. You can't help prop up a pot with a piece of wood. V'chein bedeles Shabbos Gufei Tishterei. Why not? So why can't you move it? You could take a spoon, a cup to turn it over and put it under. If it has a status of a kli, then it's usable. You could use it on Shabbos. But if it doesn't have a Torah's kli lo, then it is usher. It has no usage on Shabbos, and therefore you cannot move it. The Rambam says, "V'kol she'eno kli kagon avanim, ma'os, stones, money, kanim, reeds, koros, boards, v'chayotze b'hen asol taltalam." These have no use on Shabbos. Inherit muktzeh, muktzeh machmas gufo, money, rocks, stones. The Shulchan Aruch, davar, source 31. Davar she'en lo shaychus kli. Something that doesn't have the status of a kli, it's not connected to a kli. Kagon sroros, o avanim, pebbles and stones. Even though you can use it, but you didn't think about it before Shabbos, you didn't do anything before Shabbos to make it. We'll get to that by the Shem next year. Also, l'taltalam, that you're not allowed to be metaltel, inherit muktzeh. Rama, v'kol she'eno kli klau, also l'taltalo, afilu l'tzarech gufo, kol shekain l'tzarech makomo. Where this doesn't have any types of heterim, like a kli shemlachto lister. What are other examples of muktzeh machmas gufo? Says the Yalkut Yosef. Afia, certain types of ingredients in the kitchen that are useless on Shabbos because you would never use it. Baking powder, right? Baking powder, you only use that in raw dough, right? If you have balchaim animals, a button, money, mace, a dead body. Eitzim, koros, boards, kanim, any type of these types of items that have no use and they're not a kli, they're muktzeh machmas gufo. The Gemara comes up often, what about raw food? Let's say you're going to put something in the freezer. You want to put something in the freezer, and then you have to move a raw piece of meat out of the way to put something in the freezer. Ooh, raw piece of meat moving. Again, if you're not going to do it directly, you're going to put the food under it, just it's going to get popped up from the other food. That could be mutter because that's called tilta b'natzad or tilta b'gufa, not directly. But here, you got to pick something up, something raw. So the Gemara is machalik between fish and meat. Tana Rabbanan, the Gemara says, Dag Maliach, source 33, salted fish, mutal tatzalo, you're allowed to move. Dag Tafel, asal. Unsalted fish you can't, because the Gemara assumes nobody will eat unsalted fish. Basar, bein tafel, bein maliach, mutal tatzalo. Meat you can, because some people would eat raw meat. We'll see. Shulchan Aruch paskins that way. Again, whatever has some type of usage is allowed. Is mutter, is not muktzeh. But if it doesn't have any type of usage, it doesn't. So the Gemara, Shulchan Aruch assumes, basar chai, right, raw meat, afilu tafel, she'ena molo klau, unsalted, mutter l'taltalo, mishum chazi l'umsa, you're allowed to chew it. It works for chewing. Dag maluach mutter l'taltalo, v'she'ena maluach asr, v'nei she'ena roy, it's not roy. And the Taz explains, because unsalted raw fish is not even fit for dogs. A dog won't eat an unsalted raw piece of fish. And the meat, you could eat. And what mashmed, if it would be mutter l'klavim, it would be allowed. It wouldn't be muktzeh. The Magen Avraham doesn't like that. The Magen Avraham assumes that if you have people food, if you have something that normally human consumption, then even if it's in a state where an animal would eat it, it's still going to be muktzeh because you're not giving it to your animal. It's not royally roy for the animal. Says the Magen Avraham, "V'cha kasav amor reish perek chaf aleph de'im lo chazi lo umsa asla tatlo mishum to call midi debar achilahi anything that's edible for people to lo chazi lo meichal ad motzi Shabbos, but you can't eat it till motzi Shabbos because it has to be prepared. Leklavim nami lokai. It's not going to be for dogs. V'lo metaltalin, and that's why Rav Mordechai Eliyahu says if you have fish, uncooked fish, a cat will eat it. But nobody buys fish in order to give to their cat, says Rav Mordechai Eliyahu. Top of page 272. Tshuva, dogem she'ena muvushalim he muktzeh. Uncooked fish are muktzeh. It's not roy for people to eat. There's no heter as cat food. Nobody in their right mind buys fish to give to their cats. It's obvious. But if yourself and therefore it would be Muktzeh Machmas Gufo. The Aruch HaShulchan notes that nowadays nobody would eat raw meat. Nobody eat raw meat. So the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch says raw meat is okay because Chazi L'Umsa. Nowadays it would be Muktzeh Machmas Gufo. Because nobody eat raw meat, so you put something in the freezer, you cannot directly pick up a piece of steak that's raw. And the Ben Ish Chai, the Shmir Shabbos, also agrees that raw meat today is muktzah. Interestingly, Bizman Hazeh, the halacha might be flipped. The Gemara said raw meat is more muchan than raw fish. And the Aruch HaShulchan, others say, no, raw meat today nobody eats. But raw fish, maybe some people will eat, right? Because of sushi, people eat raw fish. So maybe today, the application of the halacha is flipped. And that's what it says in the Tshuva B'mara Bazak from Eretz Chemda. B'kayom rabim ochlim dag chai kon bisadot sushi lachein dag shebizman ben hashmasha sayaroy lachla b'tzura kazu. It's not muktzah on Shabbos. And there are other. It comes up. People we don't realize this. There are many items that are muktzah. What about that uncooked rice? Uncooked rice. Nobody's going to eat raw rice. Let's see, in the pantry, moving things around. Again, directly. Rabbi Bonner quotes in the top of page 273. Flour, yeast, dough, uncooked spaghetti. Right? Anything that needs processing, mashed potato mixes, cake mixes, popcorn, raw, are all muktzeh machmas gufo because they're not raw to eat right now and they're useless. What about vegetables that aren't eaten raw? Vegetables that aren't eaten raw. Okay, carrots are eaten raw. That's not a problem. What about potatoes and sweet potatoes? Does anybody eat them raw? Again, if you're starving, you'll eat them, but generally they're not eaten raw. So l'chorah, those are also in the category of muktzeh machmas gufa. One more halacha for today, and that is, you see on page 273, sales catalogs. Catalogs. So generally, are you supposed to read those on Shabbos? Probably not. Probably in the Gzeira of Shtari Hadyotos that you're not supposed to be involved in business activities. But let's say they have some pictures in them. You want your kids to look at them. So a catalog showing pictures, Rav Moshe assumes it is a klisha malachto le'isser at most, and it can be used to look in. That's what Rav Moshe says in 41, Sifrei Mischar v'katalogim, Tmunos u'mechirim shel chavatzim, are they muktzah? So if they're mamish, you're thinking about buying, and you're looking for ads, that could be a separate issue. But now we're talking about muktzah. He assumes they're not muktzah if they have another purpose. Or Shlomo Zalman assumed that leaflets and flyers that for advertisements, those would be worse. Those would be Muktzeh Machmas Gufo, Shlomo Zalman assumes in source number 42. Okay, how do you make something Muktzeh Machmas Gufo un-Muktzeh Machmas Gufo? How do you make it roy? So that Hashem will be the next year, and we'll have to talk about Graf Shal Rei, which is a very important topic in terms of garbage bags, filling up the garbage, taking the garbage out on Shabbos, changing diapers. So that Hashem we'll get to next time in the second half of Shiur Vav in our series.